Hi, I'm Megan. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm going to be going over the OCD cycle today. So OCD, like most anxiety-based disorders, is cyclical. While it can be really hard to identify all the ways we actually might be contributing to the way OCD keeps going, it is really important to be able to understand it so you can actually finally start breaking out of that cycle, no longer feeling so stuck and powerless when it comes to your symptoms, and finally get to a point where you can feel more yourself. So let's get started. As you can see, right, the OCD cycle kind of starts with intrusive thoughts. Now, I say kind of because technically intrusive thoughts don't necessarily cause OCD to really develop or cause us to start this cycle. Intrusive thoughts are a pretty natural, normal part of being human, and lots of people, even those who do not have OCD, get them. Right? However, this is kind of the first step that sets the next things into motion. So what I would say really starts the cycle of OCD is actually going to be the meaning we attach to those thoughts themselves. So that can sound a little odd, right? Because for most of us, if you had OCD, right, it's, the thoughts are what bothered me, right? The thoughts are the problem. However, again, it's the meaning attached because plenty of people get intrusive thoughts. The difference is most people kind of don't give it a second thought, right? They get a crazy thought. If you had a really bad day at work, oh, what if I just burned this place down and left, right? Someone without OCD is going to have that thought, maybe laugh, maybe just keep thinking, keep moving on through the rest of their day, and they're not going to think about it twice, right? However, if you have OCD, you're probably going to really want to read meaning into that, right? At its core, typically the meaning we attach to it is something like, well, I had this thought, which means it's something that probably will happen, right? If I have an intrusive thought after a hard day at work of burning that office down, I really am afraid that what if I actually do that? Well, I wouldn't have that thought if it wasn't something maybe I could do or wanted to do, right? So we're attaching meaning to it, basically that this isn't just some random thought. This must represent something I actually could do or want to do. Right? Now, if I feel like that's true and that, wow, this thought could really be real, I'm going to get really, really distressed, right? I'm going to be like, what? Oh my goodness. Could I really burn my office down? That's insane. That could harm so many people. I can't believe I'm the type of person who might even have that thought. What's wrong with me? All of this is going to bring up a ton of distress, right? And if you have OCD, you know it can feel super overwhelming. You might be getting nauseous. You feel like you might be having a panic attack, right? It's a really uncomfortable feeling. It's coming up with all kinds of intense emotion. Now, to handle that distress with OCD, we really want to do something to get rid of that feeling, right? We want to escape it. It feels too overwhelming. We don't think we can really handle it. So what we're going to do is try to engage in a compulsion, right? A compulsion is any act, physical or mental, that we're using to kind of escape our anxiety or prevent something bad from happening, right? So in that example, again, I have that thought of burning the office down. Well, maybe my compulsion to prevent that is that I unplug all my electronic devices before I leave to prevent starting a fire. I double check, triple check that everything's unplugged before I go. Maybe I have to feel like I repeat a certain phrase like, oh, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. Maybe I put my hands in my pockets because I feel like I'm going to do something. I can't trust myself to not do something dangerous as I'm leaving. Right, as I leave the door, maybe I'm double, triple checking behind me to make sure that the office is still there. I might go home, check the news right away to make sure there's no local arson that has been reported. I might seek reassurance from my coworkers just to be like, oh, hey, nothing crazy has happened. Or I might even go to my partner to double check that I'm not the type of person to do that, right? So there's all kinds of mental and physical acts I might do to try to escape that anxiety. Now, as you know, immediately that might feel good, right? We get a little bit of relief. You kind of feel like you can finally take a deep breath and let that fear go. However, if you have OCD, you know that relief is very short-lived, right? It's not going to last forever. It's a little bit of short-term relief, but ultimately it's not going to do anything to get rid of the OCD symptoms long-term, right? So as we can see here, unfortunately, the more you engage in the compulsions to make that feeling go away, the worse OCD actually becomes. This is for several reasons. One, engaging in the compulsions basically teaches our brain that they work, right? That, hey, that anxiety, that distress really was too intense. You couldn't have handled it. it's a good thing you did that compulsion and it temporarily felt better, right? So anytime we're getting that temporary relief, our brain's gonna really want to go there, right? However, as you notice, the longer you stay in the OCD cycle, you're gonna find that you're doing more and more compulsions to get the same amount of relief. A 2-minute routine where maybe you check once or twice, after months or years of having OCD might turn into a whole 30-minute routine or hour-long routine that prevents you from leaving the office until everything's done, right? So the compulsions grow with time. They take up more and more of our time, more and more of our energy. And unfortunately, they kind of serve that, hey, if I'm giving this thought that much attention, it's gonna unfortunately be more likely to reoccur, right? Our brain kind of has learned that like, this is important, this is scary. Look how much time Megan spends on the idea of her burning the office down. So that thought is gonna be way more likely to repeat in the future, right? In addition, the meaning we attach to the thought often becomes more and more kind of drawn out the longer we experience the same thought, right? While maybe the first few times I had this thought, it was a little easier to not take it personally. If I've had the thought of burning my office down for months, I might have a lot more beliefs about like the fact that that is really likely to happen, that I really am this type of person who like, I can't trust myself to not do it. So that meaning becomes even greater the more times this cycle goes on, right? So again, you'll find as long as you're engaging in the compulsions and we're attaching this meaning to the thought, symptoms tend to get worse and worse, right? The relief you get becomes shorter and shorter and you're engaging in more and more compulsions. So how do we actually break out of this? Because we don't want to be stuck in the cycle going through the same thing every day, right? So as you can see here, if you start ERP treatment, which is exposure therapy, right? The whole goal of it is instead to kind of retrain your brain, right? And move away from compulsions, because compulsions are kind of the juice that keep OCD going. It's what makes the symptoms worse over time. So instead of engaging in a compulsive behavior when triggered, with ERP, really the theory behind it is that instead of that, we're going to be sitting with our distress. So when you get all those negative feelings coming up, we're going to really just allow it to come up, allow it to sit there without doing anything to get rid of the feelings, right? Without doing anything to prevent those feared outcomes from happening, right? Even if it feels like something bad's going to happen, we're just going to sit through it. We're not going to do anything to counteract that thought, right? With enough time, our feelings, our distress does start to go down on its own without us doing anything, right? And by allowing that to happen, it teaches our brain two things. Firstly, that we really didn't need to engage in the compulsions to handle the feelings and urges, right? They do go down on their own with time if I'm not avoiding them. The second and the really big thing is that it actually shows you what happens when you face that fear. So for example, if I don't unplug everything before I leave the office, if I don't triple check, if I don't put my hands in my pockets, everything, do I actually burn the office down when I leave, right? What actually happens when I don't do these things? My OCD says that I'm definitely going to do it then without these precautions, but the reality is I'm no more or less likely to burn the office down with the compulsions or without it. So it allows your brain to kind of learn that, hey, I know I'm afraid of this, but this fear is really overblown. I'm not doing anything to act on these thoughts. And I can kind of let these thoughts go, right? I don't have to read so much meaning into them. So check out some of my other videos if you want more of a step-by-step guide on how to actually do exposure therapy. Because again, we don't jump into things like facing our biggest fear immediately. We do try to step into smaller, progressively larger steps, facing our fears, and really figuring out, again, what happens if I don't engage in those compulsions. So you can check out other resources on how to actually do that in a way that's going to be progressive and get you closer to those fears. But for now, just wanted to go through that cycle so you can better understand how your own behaviors, your own compulsions might actually be contributing to those symptoms, and hopefully start making steps to really stop engaging in those, stop giving OCD what it wants, and kind of get back to feeling normal.